Welcome back, fellow book lovers, to the Talk Fae To Me podcast, a realm where the lines between black and white blur into shades of morally gray. I'm Bree, and I'm joined by my partners in crime, Lauren and Maggie.
If you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to have you. Be sure to like, follow, comment, subscribe to us on Instagram and YouTube at Talk Fae To Me, and listen to all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Today, we have our first ever guest on the pod, an award-winning author who is releasing her debut novel in July, and we are getting the inside scoop.
So if you're ready to join us, hit that subscribe button for your new digital book club. Grab your headphones, settle in, and let the journey begin. Talk Fae To Me starts now.
All right, so we are so very excited. We have a very special guest joining us today. Author Sarah Marie Page is here to discuss her debut novel, The Illusion of Stars. She is an award-winning writer, has had her work published in Y Magazine, The Advocate, Crow's Quill, The Hippocampus Magazine, and that is just to name a few. She is a practicing attorney, which is super awesome because her and Lauren would have so many things to talk about, as Lauren is also an attorney. She also lives in Arizona, which is super cool because we live in Arizona too. The Illusion of Stars comes out July 14th, and we are lucky enough to get to read it ahead of time and talk about it in today's episode. So we will be keeping this episode spoiler free, so you don't have to worry about that. You can find Sarah on social media or on her website at sarahpagestories.com. Please join us in welcoming Sarah Marie Page to the show. Sarah, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are very, very excited. I think all three of us really, truly loved the book. Would everybody agree?
Oh, for
It was
sure.
incredible. Just the writing, Sarah, you are a master. The writing was incredible. So good.
Thank you guys. I appreciate that.
We were just gushing in our group chat as we were reading it. It was really great. I very much enjoyed it. But before we get too far into the actual story, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get started writing?
I am kind of like, a lot of authors say I've been writing my entire life, and that's true for me too. When I was little, I would sit on my dad's lap and I would dictate stories about mermaids. And I didn't even know how to use Microsoft Word. He would type them up for me and then illustrate them with clip art. And then he would print them out and staple them with cardstock paper. And I had all these little cardstock books. I wrote a lot through high school, took a break through college and most of law school. There was actually one day I was walking across campus and I saw a big flyer for an essay contest, and there was like a pretty good cash prize. So I will try entering that. And so I wrote an essay and devoted 3 weeks to just wordsmithing over it. My husband read it so many times. He was like, I will never read anything you write again until it is finished because I'm sick of reading your works of progress when you change one word and you want me to gush over the one word that you changed. Anyways, I entered it and I ended up winning. And I was thinking about the many, many years that I took off writing. And I was, if I had just written like 250 words a day through those many years that I took a break, I could have finished so many books. And so I set a goal to just write 250 words a day. That's a couple paragraphs. And did that for a couple of years. Wrote the first draft of a cozy witch manuscript that lives under the bed. We don't talk about that, though sometimes I go pillage its bones for certain things. So there are actually a couple scenes in Illusion of Stars that pillage the bones of the witchy manuscript for the swimming.
God.
Was like one of them. So was working on that. And so the story behind Illusion of Stars, I'm an attorney, and these big law firms usually hire is they will do these summer internship programs, and law firms in town take the top students of the class for these internships. And I applied at this law firm for one of their internships, and the guy that interviewed me got past the initial phase of interviews, got to the callback phase, and they ended up going with one of my classmates. So graduated law school, was in the top of my class, was looking for a job, and was like, oh, is it weird to hit somebody up for a job who turned you down? was like, I'll try it. And so I took him out to lunch and he was like, actually, your colleague, they said no. And so we actually have an opening. Do you want a job? And I was like, yeah. And so I ended up at this dream law firm through kind of like a fluky backdoor thing. So 1 year in to that job, the same mentor who hired me takes me to lunch. And he's like, Sarah, I don't think you're getting mentored. So I'm going to take you to lunch and do some mentoring. And we go to the little cafe across the street. And he's like, I just wanted to let you know that you're not good at writing. You're not good at research. You're only good at filling out forms. And when the new interns start, and remember that I wanted to be one of the interns, but I was not one of the interns. I got in through a fluky backdoor way. He's like, when this year's interns start, they're gonna push you out. They're better than you, and they're in law school. And I think he was trying to do it to be like helpful, like I'll show her the writing on the wall. But that was like the most gutting experience. I just remember looking at my salad, and I could not eat anymore. And I called my husband across the street afterwards and to him, and I was like, I need to find a new job. And as that experience was happening, I was in between the drafts of the Witchy manuscript that is under the bed that we don't talk about. And that one was being beta read by friends. And so I was in between projects, wanted to start something new. And so I started writing this book about this girl who felt like a nobody, who really wanted to be a somebody, because that's how I felt. I felt like a nobody and I really wanted to be a somebody. And that first draft, a lot has changed since that very first draft, but that first draft became the bones of Illusion of Stars. So that's where that story comes from.
The summer associate and like on-campus interview thing for law students and for lawyers is a incredibly stressful time. Glad that you made it through all of that, Sarah, and this is what we have that came from that.
It's definitely one of those worlds where it's still a man's world for sure.
Yeah.
Practicing law, like I would walk in behind these partners, and this is not writing related, this is law practicing related, but I would walk in as a first year associate behind these partners, and they're all these like silver-haired foxes, and the clients would look at me and be like, oh, this is your legal assistant here to take notes. No, I'm an attorney. I went to law school. I've had the bar exam. That is not easy. And then, of course, the male associates who are also about my same age, who are been practicing about as long as I have, they walk in and the clients are like, that's your associate. So why do I get called the legal assistant and they get called the associate? But yeah, the summer internship thing, it's a very cutthroat process. Law school is one of those things where grades matter. You're competing against everybody. You're on a curve. And so they only give out so many A's, so many B's. It's a really cutthroat process.
Yeah, I've been mistaken for a legal assistant many times by my own clients who've talked on the phone with me.
Yeah.
I am just flabbergasted. So when I finished the book last night, I was reading through, I think, your author's note at the very end of the book, and you sort of explained that story. And I'm not even joking. This is not even fluffing it up or, playing it up because we're talking to you. I was sitting there crying because I cannot believe that someone would say that to you. And I feel like multiple times actually throughout this book, I got very teary-eyed and very misty-eyed and had to put the book down and take a break because it was striking a chord so very deep within my soul. So a little background information. I work in marketing. I have always had a very, very hard time finding a job. It's very competitive because not one single job description, not one single job role within the marketing world at a single company is the same. There's no mold for you to fit, which in some ways is really good. But at the same time, they're looking for very, very specific things, some of these companies. But I related to this so much of feeling like I'm not enough, feeling like I'm not good enough, that I'm not what they want, that no one is going to want me. And there were many instances reading this book where I was just in absolute tears because I related so hard to what Isabel was going through and what Eric was feeling and everything. And then reading your note at the very back of the book, realizing that this obviously is very personal to you and is drawn from something that is so deep and emotional really just got me. So, wow, I just needed to tell you that I related so incredibly hard to this and to you, and I was in love.
Yeah. Well, I feel like writing is one of those things where you can really, like, even when I am reading other people's books, I'm like, you can tell when somebody is writing something and is feeling it. There are a couple scenes in the book that still survived to this day, and I read them, and I was not okay when I wrote that. And I always get messages from people. I can tell usually where people are in the book by the messages that they send me. Because there's one spot, and it's towards the beginning. I'm not going to say where it is because we're keeping it spoiler free, but I'll tell you off the camera. There's one spot, and people always text me like, that really hurt me. You are breaking my heart. I'm so sad. And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly which chapter you're on. But those passages like that, those like particular chapters are some of the older ones that survived through draft. And I think the emotional resonance kind of comes from just, writing it and putting your feelings on the page. Because I was like when I wrote the first draft of that book, I was trying to figure out where I fit in and where I mattered. And so I loved your story and that you really resonated with Isabel's story and Eric's story of them trying to figure out where they fit in and they mattered. And that's what I really hope people take away from this book is it touches them and that they see that everybody, the thing that ultimately helped me out when I was going through this experience with these law courses and feeling like I wasn't good enough is looking at, I'm not good at legal writing, I'm not good at legal research, but I'm a really hard worker. And so zeroing in and being, okay, I don't have these talents, but I also have other talents, and those talents matter just as much. And so one of the things that I wanted to do with this story was Isabel has a very specific skill set, and she uses that skill set to solve all of her problems. She's a doctor, and so she uses her medical knowledge to solve all of her problems. And that was very intentional because I wanted to show she had talents and skills, and she wasn't the most amazing magic, and she wasn't like, her people don't have magic. She wasn't a lot of things, but she's a very good doctor, and her skills as a doctor matter. And that was all intentional. So
well, and I really like that it was beyond her skill set she mattered. Like, I think you talked so much about where she really doubts her interpersonal like skills amongst these people, and she's like, well, why would you like me? And I felt like that really highlighted too that she's more than just these skills she had, where she was so personable and people did really care for her without her even thinking that was there. And I thought that was super cool too, that it was just, she was so much more, that she has these talents, but she's more than just her talents, even though she has doubts about her talents as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It was, one of my favorite things about Isabel. And, we so rarely get this in fantasy novels, but I love whenever I see it done, is you get a character who is just powerful in their own way. Isabel might not be the most powerful fighter. She might not be the best spy in the world, but you know what? She can fix whatever your problems are. And, she fixes her problems with her medical knowledge, and she just uses the skills that she's got in her little tool bag. And I think that it's powerful because it kind of shows your readers, right, that you can have power, you can be proud of yourself, and you can be resilient and strong without having to be good with a sword.
One of my favorite things is Eric trains her, and then he's like, if you ever run into problems, just run.
Yeah.
He's like, you have your one thing that you can do to take somebody down, and then just run.
I know,
you don't believe in me? And he's like, well, we all have our strong suits.
But even in that part, I love that she's like, no. I would be able to do a little something because of my medical knowledge, where she's like, I could incapacitate someone, but in my own way.
True. So I am very curious at how just the entire process was for you from getting the book. Do you have an agent? How did you go about actually publishing? Like, what has that process been like for you?
Yeah, so I wrote this book, and originally I was like, I'm going to traditionally publish it, which is getting an agent, selling it to a publishing house. And I started querying it, and the feedback that I kept getting from agents was, I love it. I just don't love it enough. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that almost fits with the theme of the book is like being good
Which
enough.
is
And
ironic.
it's so ironic. I was like, oh my gosh. And so for a while, and this is why I wrote Rapacity and started working on Serpent Green, because I was just like so sad about this book. And I love this book with all my heart, and just hearing over and over again, love it, just didn't love it enough was just really, really hard. And so I took a break for about a year while I tried to figure out like what I was going to do with it. And that's why I always have to explain to people who read my newsletter and read Rapacity and can't wait for that story to continue. And I'm like, the one that I'm actually coming out with is different. Set in a different world, different. But if you liked Rapacity, you would really like Illusion of Stars. The romance dynamic, I feel like, is very similar, and the banter is very similar. But I was just too sad to work on Illusion of Stars because I kept getting rejections. And I decided, and this is in part from just my friends who were like, the story deserves to be out there. And why are you seeking validation from other people? You know it's good. Why do you keep seeking validation from other people? And then my friend Kelsey was like, you're trying to do things the quote unquote right way, and I hate that. And just go do it your own way. And I was like, okay, I'll go do it my own way. I actually, right before that, and this, by the time this episode airs, I will have talked about it publicly, but I have not yet. So, right before I went to go do it my own way, I found out that a pretty big imprint takes unagented submissions. And so I chaos queried them. They're the last people that I queried. And I chaos queried them on like a Tuesday night at 11 p.m. I go to bed at 9. So I'm like way past my bedtime on like a Tuesday night. And I query this publishing house. And I'm not going to say who they are, but they're the parent imprint of another imprint that published a very popular dragon book that came out last summer.
My God.
That rhymes with Morthring. Anyways, so Chris queried them and forgot about it. And then in January, I got an email from them, and they were like, it's not a good fit for us, rejected. And I'm like, okay, fair. I KS queried you at 11 p.m. And I'm already starting down the process of indie publishing it. 2 minutes later, I get a second email. Oh my gosh, we accidentally rejected this. We did not mean to reject this. We're actually really interested in considering it. And I passed it along to one of my colleagues, like, we're going to read the manuscript and let us know if you have to withdraw it or if you get an offer from somewhere else. Here's the thing with publishing, though, is that they move really, really, really slow. And so, like, it can take I have a really close friend who just got a book deal. It's not announced yet either, but the editor who offered on her book had the manuscript for a year before she read it. And so publishing just like it moves really, really slow.
Gosh.
And so I had already started down the path of indie publishing this book. And then all of a sudden I have this really cool publisher who's like, I'm interested in reading it and I'm interested in looking at it. And I let them consider it for a little bit. Ultimately, I was like, even if they made me an offer, I don't know if I would take it because I feel like I have made promises to people about releasing it and putting it out there. And I don't want to have to go back to the people who are really excited about the book and be like, I can't tell you, I'm pushing back the publication date. I can't tell you when I'm going to publish it, and I can't tell you why. That would just be really frustrating to me if I was trying to follow somebody's career that I was really excited about, and then all of a sudden they're not putting it out anymore. And so I withdrew it from this publisher. So they were interested in considering it, and I sent them a very nice note, and I said, thank you so much. I'm really flattered because I am so flattered because they took me out of the slushiest slush pile when I don't have an agent and was competing against not only agented authors, but also authors who had been published who like you read and you like their books. So really flattered that you're interested. I'm ultimately just going to move ahead with indie publishing and I'm withdrawing it. I also think that there is a lot of poetry too, like given the themes of the book, to ultimately come back and say, it is enough and I don't need your validation. Like, I'm not looking for that anymore. And I am confident that people will love this book, and I don't need your approval. So I haven't told anybody that yet, but I'm going to tell that story next week, probably right before I release the cover publicly. So
Wow. Yeah, that story just fits so well with the themes of the book and, kind of taking back your own power, doing things the way you need to build yourself up. And it just it fits so well with the message of the book. So that's huge. And I mean, congratulations on getting somebody, at a big publishing house to, pick your book and put it in the pile with, published authors. And but also congratulations on kind of, I don't know, forging your own path. I think that's incredible.
thanks. It was the right decision. It was a hard decision because it's something that, like, you want something, like, so bad, and you wanted it for years so bad, and then to be like, this is the right thing. But
Mhm.
it still was hard. It was not an easy thing to do,
Yeah.
but it was the right thing to do because, like I said, I think it would have been really frustrating for me to go back to everybody and be like, so I'm bumping the release date. Can't tell you why. Can't tell you how long. You know.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think as crazy, I think it's just kind of crazy that it is still slow, that I understand. I mean, I can imagine how many manuscripts and pitches publishing houses do get on a daily basis. I can't imagine what that load is like of all of the aspiring authors and writers and poets and everyone out there. I think it's probably an incredible volume. But at the same time, I think it's wild that they haven't, or that there's just the process isn't expedited in some type of way that it could still take so so long. I think that's wild. It makes me think, like, how does anybody get anything published? But then also at the same time, it makes me think about Rebecca Yarros, that she wrote one book, it was published 6 months later, she has another book, and in the middle of that, she had released other stories too that were not fantasy, that were like modern romance. I think didn't she? I think she's released like 4 books last year, which is just like mind blowing, I think, in and of itself. Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah, because it's slow. Because people
Yeah.
just, I mean, they just like write them, and by the time they're ready, I do think Iron Flame was kind of rushed to publication. I have not
Yeah.
read it, but that is what I have heard from like the feedback was that like people
Yes.
were like, oh, the quality of the writing wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. It went viral on TikTok and on the internet, and they for sure sped that up on top of the fact that Iron Flame was originally supposed to be 2 books, and they convinced her to make it 1 book, which makes it part 1 and part 2, and they're so drastically different. Which I really don't know how I would have felt if it would have been like 2 different stories instead of 1 book, because I think would have really left you lacking at the end of part 1. But
Mhm.
anyways, yeah, for sure. That's been a common complaint. On top of the fact of all the actual publishing, like, physical issues that all the books had, of the misprints and the missing pages and all kinds of crazy stuff, the quality, for sure, went down. But that's a whole different story. But in general, yeah, just wild, I think, of how slow it is, and that it's not an industry I feel like has really kept up with the times and evolved, because we're in such a technology world. You would think that the process would be faster somehow, which, I mean, I guess you have to sit and read it, so I guess it makes sense.
Mhm.
this is true. I will say one of the fun things about being indie that I did not think about when I decided to go indie is I have total control. So Rebecca Yarros wanted to make it 2 books, but they told her, no, this needs to be 1 book. And so she was contractually obligated to make it 1 book. I have another friend who's being traditionally published, and her book, she had initially conceptualized it as a trilogy. And her publisher was like, we'll take it, but we only want it as a duology. And so she's like, well, I now have to reconfigure the last 2 books to try and make it fit into a duology when I had originally planned this out to be a trilogy. And so she's like, do I either try and cram everything into 1 book, or do I throw out that plan and do something totally different? But as an indie, you have total control. So I knew what I want with it. And that also is kind of fun because it means that I can show people things and connect with people in a way that I don't think traditionally published authors necessarily can. On my newsletter, I sent out an email and said, if you respond to this, I'll show you a secret. And to some people, I showed the cover. And traditionally published authors do. They're constrained with what they can show for snippets and what they can, because they don't own their work anymore. Also very inspired by Taylor Swift saying artists should own their work, and her, going indie when her contract was up. So yeah, that's been like a really fun, unexpected like perk of being indie.
That's awesome.
I would have never even thought about that you get to control like what you share or like when you share it. It's on your own timeline. And I think that adds such an element of personal relationship to your book. Obviously, I know any writer has written their work, but the fact that you get to be so hands-on in every single aspect, that's so amazing.
And I feel like in this world, because things are so competitive, I feel like people, and this is not a slight to anybody because I totally can understand, but it's like you were saying, if you're contractually obligated to do something and you don't want to do it, but you have to, or maybe you feel the pressure because maybe there's a scene or like a moment in your story that you feel really, really makes it what it is or contributes to your character's development or something to that nature, and your publisher, your editor really doesn't like it and thinks it's fluff and it just needs to be removed. I feel like, yeah, like you were saying, if you're contracted, you may not be able to fight, but as an indie author, you can really push and fight the good fight of the things that you feel make your story whole and get to tell your story successfully. And that is really amazing. And you don't have to sacrifice the quality, the quantity, anything, because it's yours. And that's super awesome. That's not something I would have considered either.
Yeah, they belong to me. It belongs to me and it is mine. And for right now, that's the right decision.
Yeah. I know Lauren had a question for you. We were talking about it yesterday since you brought up inspiration of Taylor Swift.
Yeah. So as I was reading and I was taking notes kind of all the way through, highlighting whatever, and there were a lot of sections where I just thought your writing was just so beautifully constructed. And so it really made me curious, like, who do you draw writing inspiration from? Or, what are your favorite authors where you're drawing this sort of distinctive poetic style that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I anxiety research a lot. So I have read a lot of writing craft books. The first things that I started anxiety researching when I was starting off writing was how to write pretty, because I want to write poetically. And so there are a lot of different tips that you can implement for how to write poetically. For example, using like a more specific noun tends to evoke a more specific image. So instead of saying like a dog, saying a chihuahua, that tends to help. Anyways, so a lot of research, but for inspiration for this book specifically, I was inspired by the Night Circus because I liked the illusion magic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I liked the scene. It's been a really long time since I read it, but there's one scene where I think the main character is Cecilia. She just appears dramatically with illusion magic. And I was like, I want to write a book about a sexy guy who can just appear dramatically with illusion magic. He does it a couple times in the book, but not nearly enough. So I'm like, I'll have to have him do it more in book 2.
And the next one.
Yes.
I want to see him do it more in the next one.
The other scene, and so yeah, that's on my agenda for the next one, was having him like disappear more with illusion magic dramatically. He does it twice in the first book, but it's not nearly enough, and it's not like nearly dramatic enough. The other thing that inspired me, I was reading a first aid book, doing some research, and it said irrigate a wound with a stream of water. And what it meant was, put the wound under like a faucet or a stream. But like my mind went to an actual stream, like irrigate a wound with an actual stream of water. That's where the ravine scene came from, where Eric ends up in the stream. I'm going to be like a little bit vague. But yeah, that's why he ended up in the stream. In the early drafts, my friends were killing me because they just had them go down into the ravine. And they're like, he's a smart military commander. Why would he just go down into the ravine? And so they bugged me about that for drafts. And I eventually had to change it so that she falls into the ravine and he has to go get her. Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. I really liked how the characters were not monarchy, but worked with the monarchy. And so that's how I kind of got the job for her being the apprentice physician. So those are some of the things that just random, really weird things that inspired different things in the book.
Now that you have said the night circus, I can totally see it. Because as I was reading, I was trying to think of what your writing was reminding me of, and I was getting a lot of Rebecca Ross because to me she's a really poetic author. But Erin Morgenstern, absolutely, I can totally see it. Super, just beautiful poetic writing, and I just so appreciated that in your book because I think in the fantasy romance space, there's a lot of good stories that do not have critically good writing. They're great stories though, and so we love them anyway. And your book was one of the, is one of the few that I've read in a long time that had critically great writing and a really just beautiful prose. So that was just one thing that really stuck out to me.
Thank you. I do really try and make sure that I like reading pretty prose, and so I try and write pretty prose because I like reading it.
And that's so interesting that you've obviously taken legal writing classes because they tell us absolutely do not write like that as a lawyer. They tell it, I wrote like that my first year and they said, please stop doing that.
Yeah. And maybe that's why he was like, you're not good at legal writing.
I know. Yeah. Because they hate it. I'll tell you. Attorneys
so funny.
Don't usually like that. So yeah, that's so funny.
You're supposed to be, with legal writing, you're supposed to be kind of dry. I always err a little bit more conversational with clients, and then I'm like, I should probably rein it in a little bit how chatty I am. I've also been, specifically my legal writing, inspired by the reels that are responding to this a man would. And I don't know if you guys have seen those. I'm in the algorithm for corporate reels because I think they're funny. And so I get bookstagram ones, but I also get corporate humor because I think it's funny and it just sucks me in. So there's one that's a whole trend series of responding to this email like a man would. And it's just, they take out, I hope you're having a great day and please send me these documents when you can. And just please send these documents now, period. So,
or not even a please, just send the document.
Just send documents, period.
When I'm emailing my paralegal or my legal assistant, I will end things with exclamation points and smiley faces. I will not do that.
It's such a feminine thing. I love it.
I want my paralegal to know that I love her, so I'll end the email with a smiley face, but I would literally not do that to almost anybody else.
The amount of times that my manager, I would sit there and overthink because she would send me a Slack message and it would be short to the point and it would be a period. And I would be like, oh my God, she's mad. I did something wrong. I can't believe this. How do I fix this? Why is she mad at me? And then I would literally go into her office and be like, hey, Brie, how's it going? I'm like, oh, okay. So it was literally just me.
I have kind of a follow-up question, Sarah. I guess we discussed a little bit where you kind of got your story inspiration. We talked about the writing inspiration, but I'm a little bit more interested to hear about kind of story inspiration. I know you've said some of the scenes were inspired by specific things. Is there any other fantasy romance books or authors in the genre that kind of inspired you, maybe with the magic system or the setting?
Mm-hmm. So I really like V. Schwab's writing. I would not say she inspired the magic system or the setting. The magic system, primarily Night Circus, and I also the book is dedicated to my friend who is also named Sarah because Sarah is one of those very common names. But the book is dedicated to my friend Sarah. Right after the law clerk incident, we went to go visit them. They were living in Miami, and I was like, hey, I'm started this new book and I have nothing written, very basically, but I do have this scene of this girl and this boy and they're arguing with each other. I do not know who they are. And she read it and she's like, he seems like he should be in the military. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, also, you should make him the most powerful, most sexy person ever. I was like, okay, I can do that too. So Eric came from that. I would say Spin the Dawn, the Night Circus were big for inspirations. I also really in the editing phase, and I call it, this is using my attorney brain, and I think where my skills as an attorney come in really good. So I have things that I want to have happen. I'm like, I want to have them end up in the ravine so that the wound can be irrigated by a stream. But how did they get there? And that's using my attorney brain to, or tie it in. So I'll type something I don't know, I'm going to give a ton of specifics. I'll give it to you off camera. I'll tell you other specifics, but I'll type something and I'll be like, wonder how to tie that in. And then go back and be like, okay, how am I going to tie that thing in? A lot of the twists actually came through that, where I just type something and I've got to figure out how that works, you know?
Yeah.
The amount of times I gasped reading this, so good. The shocks, the twists, the turns, I didn't see them coming. What did we just read? Oh, we just read Bride, and we just released our episode on it a couple weeks ago where we reviewed it, and Maggie and I were like, oh yeah, we saw that coming a mile away, and Nora was like, not me. You had so many good twists and turns and plot points and things that I did not see coming, which is again just a testament to your writing and your style and your construction of everything. I was sitting on the couch last night just oh my gosh, I can't believe that. And I texted in the group chat and I was like, I am on the edge of my seat. I cannot believe this is happening. Just kudos. So good.
Oh my
so
gosh.
Good.
Yeah, there was a reveal towards the end of the book. And as we're leading up to it, I was like, I feel like something bad is about to happen. And then we got to the big reveal and I was like, oh my God, I did not see it coming at all. I was so shocked.
Absolutely.
It was incredible.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm so curious to see if I'm right.
Well, there were kind of clues and allusions to it earlier in the book, and I'd been highlighting them because the language you were using, I was like, I feel like these are Easter eggs. I feel like this is going to matter later. And then when the puzzle pieces all came together towards the end, which we could talk about what part that was, but I was like, oh my God, she's a genius. So good.
So curious to know which part, but we'll talk about it later.
We can talk about it later.
So this book did end on a cliffhanger. Can you talk us through maybe next steps and where you think the story is headed? I know we haven't even hit release yet, but I can imagine that your brain is already turning, it's already moving and grooving, and you've got some things down. Have you started that process yet?
Yeah, I've started doing a really bad first draft. So my first drafts are like so bad. People will just say things, and this is because I'm way better in the editing phase. Once I'm like, that's interesting, like how does that actually fit in? In the first drafts, I'm just like, want this thing to happen, and figure out how they fit. So I have a collection of scenes that I want in there, and I'm figuring out how to put them in and things that I want. I will say Eric is more of a POV character in book 2. So
good.
In book 1,
I'm excited.
In book 1, it's just her, and it's mostly just her. At book 2, he is more of a POV character. It'll be like a 70-30 split, so he'll be like kind of it'll still be majority from her, but I was like, I think we need to get a little bit more of his like POV in book 2, and he's pretty fun to write from too. I don't know if you guys read the bonus chapter at all.
I was saving it for after this.
I know, me too.
I was saving it because I just want to stay in the world a little longer, so I'll save it for myself for later.
Yeah.
He is so dumb in the bonus chapter. Like, you guys thought he was like dumb before. Like, he's so dumb in the bonus chapter. Anyways, he's fun.
Somebody called him this in the book. Somebody called him dense. And I was like, he is a little dense.
My proofreader left a really nice review on Goodreads, and she's like, Isabel, la, 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 la. And then she's like, and Eric is an idiot. And she's like, I'm like, yeah, if you think he's an idiot, just wait till you read the bonus.
Yeah, but I still love him. There were parts I was highlighting and like putting in notes like, oh, my sweet baby Eric. I think it's when he's, giving some sort of a glance, a glance at Isabel. And I'm like, oh my God, he is such a lover boy deep down, I think.
He is a lover. He has a very hidden soft side. So he comes across just kind of hard a little bit, but then secretly is and a really big tease. He teases her quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite sort of, not even tropes, but kind of character archetypes is these like emo, tortured, quiet men, that are deep down softies. And that's totally the vibes I got from Eric. And so I was just like, kicking my feet, giggling while reading. I just was having the best time.
Good. I'm glad you liked it.
So when you're sort of planning out your next book, you have kind of your collection of scenes in your head. How do you organize all of this? Or is it just sort of your collection of scenes and then figuring out what order they work in, and then you're filling out kind of the story in between on how they're getting from plot point to plot point?
Yeah, so writing is very much like trial and error. So the very first draft is usually just a terrible, terrible first draft. The book that you guys read is like 100,000 words. My first draft of it was like 60,000. So much, much, much shorter. And the entire second half of the book is missing and very different. And so I got to make some scaffolding for myself to climb on, right? And then once I have that scaffolding, I can be okay, how does this all tie together and how does this all fit? But the first draft is very much just me figuring things out. I don't want to give too much away for the second book because I don't want to give away too much about the ending of the first book. But,
right.
Yes.
I have some scenes that I'm like super excited about, and I really can't wait to put them all together. And there are things that were Easter egged in the first book that are going to come back. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh my gosh.
Now
One
I
of
wanna
my
know.
favorite things is, I think one of the things that I'm good at in writing is being a little bit of a magician. Just look over here, and I'm gonna make you look and care about this thing while I'm actually secretly info dumping something else that's important. So
Wow. That is I'm so
yeah,
excited.
you're like, what are they? And I'm like, I'm not
Yeah,
gonna tell you.
I'm like, do I need to reread?
I'm thinking back and I'm like, okay, could it have been this thing? Things that I noticed that I was like, is that important for later? Is that an Easter egg? But I'm sure there were so many that I missed.
I just had a thought. And it has it has nothing to do with the plot necessarily, but I have to say I very much enjoyed your I don't even know how to describe it, I guess, but your use of chapters. I love that you had so many chapters that were a couple words. It made the impact, and it made it so much more oh wow. I don't even know to say. I
It's
know you know what I'm
punchy.
talking about.
Yeah.
It was so good the way that you broke it up in the structure, like the actual physical structure of how things were laid out. Ooh, I enjoyed it. It really made me want to just flip a little faster, just tap that screen harder to make those pages go so I could get to it, because it was so great. I truly have just so many great things to say.
And it gave us such great insight as to what was going on in Isabel's head and sort of where she was at mentally. I thought, yeah, those little clippy snippet chapters I thought were such a good, and for anybody who's experienced anxiety and some of these issues in the past, sometimes that is the way your brain's operating. You're kind of stuck on one thought and there's really nothing else there. You're just stuck on this one thing. So yeah, it was very impactful. So, what are your long-term kind of goals as an author? Obviously, we're going to continue with Illusion of Stars as a series. I don't know, unless you envision it to be a duology, a trilogy, or if you can't say, that's fine. Are you looking to always do indie publishing or hoping to eventually do traditional?
So Illusion of Stars is a duology. So their story will wrap up in book 2. And then I have a couple other books that I have stewing on the back burner that I'm really excited to write. One of them is Serpent Green. So I have a short story called Rapacity that's set in the world of Serpent Green. The biggest complaint that I get about Rapacity is everybody says that they wish it was longer. They're like, I wanted more, wish it was longer because I liked it and I wanted more. And I'm like, okay, maybe I could turn that one into a full-length book someday because it would make a great full-length story. There's also Serpent Green, which is my love letter to Holly Black's Cruel Prince. So Izzy is my soft girl. Sienna would curb stomp Izzy. She is much, much grumpier. Anyways, so there's Serpent Green. As for whether or not I always want to stay indie, I would say that being indie was the right thing for this book. Given the themes of this book and the journey that this book took, that was right for this book. And I'm excited to release it out into the world as an indie. Would I ever consider traditional publishing? Yeah, because I do think there are things that a traditional publisher can offer that I necessarily can't do for myself as an indie. So, for example, one of those things is as an indie, it's a lot harder to get into bookstores. Traditional publishing, they'll help you get placement in bookstores, they'll help sell foreign rights and translations and stuff like that. And as an indie, that's hard to do. I'm not totally opposed to the idea of going traditional publishing. And if something happened or if I was approached or they came, then yeah, I would definitely consider it. But for right now, being indie with this one was the right decision because of the book and the themes of the book.
Is this book going to just be digital, or is it going to be printed? Is it going to have an audio version? Like, do you have any plans in that sort of realm for Illusion of Stars?
Yeah, so for right now, I am releasing it as an ebook and a paperback in about 6 months. So I'm aiming for probably around like Christmas time. I would love to do like a special edition hardcover.
Oh my God, I would
And
love that.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
just in time for Christmas. And the reason that I am just doing an ebook and a paperback right now is because it was a lot of work trying to figure out. You learn how to write a book, but then it's like law. Lauren would probably really appreciate this, where law school teaches you the theory and then does not teach you how to practice law. And
absolutely.
That's very much learning on the job in the moment. And so indie publishing this has been the same sort of journey where it's like, know how to write a good story, know how to write a good book, do not know anything about Ingram Spark. And so I was just like, I'm just going to do the paperback. And when Christmas hits, I'll do like a special edition hardcover with a different, really pretty cover and maybe some fancy edges or something like that. And then that would make a great Christmas gift.
I'm a total sucker for sprayed edges. So I will absolutely be picking up a version with sprayed edges for sure.
I love the sprayed edges too.
That is awesome. I am very excited to have a physical copy because I would love it. I would love to highlight. I would love to tab. I would love to write and all the things. And I know that, well, obviously it's a Kindle version and you can do those things too, but there's just something about having it. And I want to put it on my shelf and I want to display it because I loved it and I just think it's so great and I want to tell everybody about it.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. I just got a message last night so I have released most of the arcs are going to go out after the cover releases, but I have released a few arcs to some people like you guys. And I just got a message from one of those people last night. And so I'm on chapter 2 and I already know that this is a book that I would like physically. Where is the physical pre-order for it? And I'm like, I don't have it up yet because I'm still trying to get the files approved through Ingram Spark. I'm working on it, and I've had so many people reaching out to, like, where can I pre-order? Where's my copy to pre-order? And I'm like, I'm working on getting it up. I was gonna wait to open up pre-orders till after the cover released, but I'm working on getting them up early just because there has been so much interest in it, which is like really, really exciting to see. And it's really fun to see people get really excited about it because I've been excited about it for years and years and years, and so to be able to share that. It's really fun.
Yeah, I can already predict that when this reaches Book Talk and Bookstagram, this is gonna blow up. This has all of the makings of the next When the Moon Hatched, right, by Sarah Parker. Like one that just hadn't really heard of Sarah Parker before, and then all of a sudden she just blew up and she's everywhere now. Her books are everywhere. I just feel like Illusion of Stars is gonna be the next huge Book Talk thing.
I hope so. That would be fun. You guys will be like, I saw it first.
Oh my God, yeah. I feel so special. But now I'm like, no, I need the next one. Bree and I were texting this morning about it. I was like, I need the next one so badly.
Yep. I'm working on it. Hopefully the bonus chapter will help a little bit. But yeah, the next one, I love Izzy and Eric. I have so much fun writing them, and they're fun characters to do. So.
And Lauren and I were talking last night in our group chat, and she was saying she just loves how just absolutely painfully, amazingly awkward Isabel is.
I was getting so uncomfortable reading her, but I love it. I think that I've read kind of other authors try to do the whole like, oh, she's awkward, but like, I don't think I've ever come across another character that is as painfully and hilariously awkward as Izzy is.
She's so awkward. And She's even almost. So the one horse scene I was bullied into
Yes,
writing.
that one.
Oh my God.
Yes, that was like, yeah, painful one horse scene. So my friend Kelsey is the trope queen. She just reads a ton. She's read 2 versions of the book, and she's the one that she gave me the idea for the whole knife subplot thing. Anyways, so she's very good at romance tropes and romance beats. And she read the most recent draft because she was going to do one final read through and just make sure everything looked good. And she was like, Sarah, I noticed that you were setting up for one horse and you were promising one horse. And then you did kind of a one horse, but it wasn't like the one horse that I wanted. And she's like, I have an idea for you. And she texts me the idea and I'm like, I can't do it. And she's like, you have to do it. And I'm like, I can't. She's like, you set it up. You set it up to do it. And I'm like, no. And so then I like half did it. And she was like, no, Sarah, you have to go the whole way.
Full commit.
And I'm like, I don't want to go the whole way. she's like, do it. And so she bullied me into writing it. And then I wrote it and I was like, it is funny, but it's so awkward.
But it was gold. It was so
good.
such gold. Oh my God.
I was on a plane reading it because I was traveling for work. And so I was reading it on the plane and I was like cackling to myself. And the lady next to me was like looking at me and I was like, oh my God, I need to like put this down. This is so funny.
Yeah. It was good.
It may be the most awkward one horse scene that has ever been written. My friend Sarah, like I told her that because she has not read the new version with the new one horse scene. I was like, yeah, I got bullied into writing a really awkward one horse scene. And she thought about it. She's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, what do you think? It's worse.
Yeah,
Oh
it's worse. It's worse.
Maggie, do you have any questions or anything that you have for Sarah?
Okay, can you pronounce the names of the magics that they do?
Oh yeah, okay, that's a good
like
one.
I was sitting there trying so hard to use context clues or like other books I've read, but I just cannot figure out how to say these.
Oh, okay, so it's Reeker, and that is Old Norse for smoke because it's like smoke.
Oh,
And then Skyki is the other one, and that's like for the bold like language in their terms. I actually drew a lot from Old Norse because I liked how I liked how it sounded and how it felt. So they actually, and I would just look up what is the word for Old Norse smoke, and they're like reefer, and I'm like, okay,
That makes so much sense. No,
Yeah.
like I was sitting there, I just can't like. Growing up in Arizona, we have so little exposure to any Scandinavian languages, and I could not do it. I was like, okay.
It was funny because I've been watching Ragnarok on Netflix, and it's a Norwegian show, and it's like filmed there. The actors are from there, but the names of characters are some of the same ones in the book. So like, one of the main characters is dating a girl named Signy, and I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. There's a Bjorn. There's a oh gosh, what is his name? Jens. And so I was, oh my God, it's just incredible that at the same time reading this book, I'm also watching the show and the names are the same.
Which also I thought it was crazy because we just read A Fate Inked in Blood, and that is in that realm too, isn't it?
It's like Norse stuff.
Yeah.
And we can cut all this out
that.
too if we have to, but yeah, I was just like, I thought it was cool.
yeah, they're like, yeah, it's like mildly Scandinavian. The topography for the Sanook Islands is kind of loosely inspired by the topography of the Faroe Islands, which is a tiny little island cluster between Denmark and Iceland. So,
Okay.
and the Faroe Islands don't have trees, so those Sanooks don't have trees.
I thought that was a cool
I did
twist too, of the fact that she was like, what the heck are these? This is what trees look like? Wow. I thought that was really fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. So anyways, that's why, that's what the Sanooks are based on, just like in geography and in landscape topography and in their treelessness based on their furrows.
I know a couple days ago you just released the character art. How was that process of bringing them to life? Did you work with an artist? Is it someone that you know, or how did that come to fruition?
Yeah, so Gianni she does a lot of bookish art, and she did some really pretty art of the Cruel Prince. And I was like, love your Cruel Prince art. Would you be willing to do some for me? And you just gotta trust the process with Gianni. She's really, really good. And she'll be like, yep, you're on my calendar. And then like 4 months later, 3 months later, she just hands you a fully formed sketch. And you're like, thank you. It looks beautiful. I actually have another one from her that I got a couple of days ago because she did that first one. And I was like, Gianni, I love this so much. Because character art's kind of hard. I have some character that I've gotten from some other artists. So there's one of like Isabel holding a knife. I actually do have a Eric version of that, but I did not like how the artist did him. And so I'm like, I will not release it to the world because I think that bad character art is worse than no character art because a lot of people, and this is just like what I've been told through my newsletter, subscribers emailing me back. They're like, if I don't like the characters, I won't read the book. And my mom has even said that to me. She's like, you got to be careful with character art. She reads a lot of fantasy too because if people don't like what the characters look like, they won't pick up the book. And so no character art better than bad character art. So but I do have some more from Gianni. I'll send it to you guys after this. I just got it last week. So
oh my gosh. Which is so crazy that you say that about the character art because again in our episode of Bride that we released last week, Lauren really had a bone to pick with Ali Hazelwood about his shaved head.
Oh, I hated it so much. I full on I read that part where I was like, okay, he's got a shaved head. And I just said, no, he doesn't. He's got a man bun. He doesn't have a shaved head. I don't care what you have to tell me, Ali Hazelwood. I changed it in my head. And so I like avoid looking up character art of the characters from that book because they look different in my head.
Yes. My brain does the same thing too. Where it's like I particularly do not long-haired love interests unless they have a man bun. Like man buns, okay, cool. They can have a man bun. They can have like my length of hair, not long hair that is just like, straight long. And whenever my brain is, and not beards, they can have scruff. They can have like
no
scruff,
beard,
but no like full beard, please. And if it's like long hair, and I remember like reading a book and he has long hair and a beard, and I was like, I can't do it. Please, no. My brain just says nope, So
we're just about hitting our hour mark here. Do we have any other last questions or thoughts or anything else we want to discuss before we wrap this up today?
I think I have some spoilery questions that I will save for later.
Spoilers. Very excited. I cannot wait to discuss all of the actual plot points and things in the book that made me want to crawl under a rock because it was literally like you just cut open the top of my head and peered inside. I'm not joking. I was sitting in my son's room, rocking him in his chair, feeding him to go to like take a nap, I think. And just like, I think it was like Wednesday afternoon or something. It was just so random. And I'm sitting there rocking him. And I get to this one part, I think it was about halfway, this conversation between Isabel and Eric. And I literally went, put my phone down, screenshotted it, and just like sat there and cried for like a solid minute because I was like, I can't believe she just did that. I am appalled. I'm disgusted. Not really. It was amazing. It was beautiful. But I was just flabbergasted that it was great. It was so good.
Yeah.
Oh, so many great little snippets and lines and things between the two of them. Oh, just chef's kiss.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Well, let's take it off air and then we can talk about all the spoilers. Because I'm like, which part is this?
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Sarah. We are very, very excited to share Illusion of the Stars with everyone. Also, the title, I didn't even put it together until this morning when I was typing stuff out, and I was like, oh my gosh. And like it clicked in my brain of why that's the title. And I was like, wow, see, so clever. I was just a big fan. But we are so happy to have had you here today. The book comes out in just a few short weeks. We are very excited to share our take with everyone, and we can't wait to see where your career goes, where this story goes. We wish you all the best in everything. So thank you so much. Follow her on social media at Sarah Page Stories, and follow us at Talk Fae To Me. Remember, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. But that is it for now. Adios.
Thanks, guys.